Hmm. 3 days. That is how long it took my daughter and her husband to decide I was no longer useful. I know the exact number because I counted. Not the days, the lies. 1. When my daughter called in October and said the assisted living facility was just a tour, Dad, just to see what's out there. 2. When my son-in-law told me the paperwork I was signing was a routine power of attorney, standard stuff, totally reversible. 3. When my daughter looked me in the eye at Thanksgiving dinner and said, "We love you, Dad. We just want what's best for you." I am Walter Crane. I am 71 years old. I spent 38 years as a structural engineer in Atlanta, Georgia, designing bridges that are still standing today. I built things meant to last. I understood load-bearing capacity. I understood what happens when a foundation is compromised. And I am telling you this story because the day my son-in-law slid that folder across my kitchen table and told me to sign, I finally understood that the most dangerous structural failure is not in concrete or steel. It is in family. This is the story of how I transferred every asset I owned into an irrevocable trust, while my daughter and her husband were 35,000 feet in the air, somewhere over the Atlantic, on a vacation I had paid for. They landed to nothing. I was sitting on my porch in Savannah drinking sweet tea when their plane touched down. Let me go back to the beginning, because you need to understand who I was before you can understand what I became. My wife Catherine died 6 years ago. Pancreatic cancer. 11 weeks from diagnosis to the end. She was 64 years old, and she was the most decent human being I have ever known. We had one child together. Our daughter, my daughter, Melissa. She was 38 when Catherine died. She cried at the funeral in a way that made me think grief had shaken something loose in her. I was wrong. It had not shaken anything loose. It had simply revealed what was already there. I retired 8 months after Catherine passed. I could not concentrate on load calculations anymore. Every number felt meaningless. I sold our house in Buckhead, the house where Melissa had grown up, where we had marked her height on the kitchen door frame every birthday, where Catherine had kept a garden of tomatoes and zinnias that I still cannot look at photographs of without my throat tightening. I sold it, and I moved to a smaller place in Savannah because Catherine had always wanted to retire there, and I wanted to be somewhere she had dreamed of. The house in Savannah was paid for in cash. I also had a rental property in Decatur, a duplex I had bought in 2003 that had appreciated considerably. I had retirement accounts, a pension from the firm, and Catherine's life insurance. I was not extravagant. I drove a 10-year-old Volvo. I ate breakfast at a diner on Bull Street where the coffee was strong and the waitress knew my order. I was comfortable, and I was quiet, and I was learning, slowly, how to be a man whose wife was gone. Melissa called every Sunday. At first. Then every other Sunday. Then when she felt like it. She had married Derek Holloway 3 years before Catherine died. I had tried to like Derek from the beginning. He was a financial consultant in Alpharetta, wore good suits, had a firm handshake, spoke fluently about market trends and investment vehicles in a way that made him sound knowledgeable until you realized he was just rearranging the same 6 phrases. He called me Walter from the first day we met. Never, sir. Never Mr. Crane. Walter, as though we had grown up together. As though familiarity was something you could just claim without earning it. Catherine had said to me once, quietly, after a Sunday dinner, "That man looks at your bookshelves the way some men look at other men's wives." I had laughed at the time. I should have written it down. The first suggestion of the assisted living facility came 14 months after I moved to Savannah. Melissa was visiting for a weekend, and we were eating lunch at a place on River Street when she said it so casually, sandwiched between a comment about the shrimp and a question about whether I needed a new air conditioning unit, that I almost missed it. "There's actually a really beautiful place about 20 minutes from us in Alpharetta, Dad. Very upscale. More like a resort, honestly." Derek and I drove past it and thought of you. I put my fork down. Thought of me, why? She smiled. The smile was practiced. "You're alone down here. We worry. I have neighbors. I have friends at the diner. I have video calls with your aunt in Portland every Thursday. That's not the same." "No," I said. "It is not the same as living 20 minutes from you in a facility so you can stop worrying about me from a distance." The subject was dropped. but it was not gone. It was filed. Derek called me 6 weeks later, not Melissa. Derek. He said he had been reviewing my financial situation at Melissa's request, and he had some concerns he wanted to walk me through. I asked him who had given him access to my financial situation. He said Melissa had shared some documents with him. I asked which documents. He became vague. I let the conversation end. That night, I called my attorney, an old friend named Philip Garrett who had handled Catherine's estate and who had known me for 20 years. I told him what Derek had said. Philip was quiet for a moment. Then he said, "Walter, I want you to come into the office, not by phone, in person." I drove to Atlanta 3 days later. Philip showed me something that made the room go very still. 6 weeks before Catherine died, when I had been at the hospital nearly every day and sleeping 4 hours a night, someone had requested a copy of my property deed for the Savannah house. Not the deed itself. A certified copy. Philip had found the request in county records during a routine review of my estate documents, something he did every 2 years. The request had been filed under a real estate consultation firm. The firm's registered agent was a company called Holloway Advisory Group. I sat in Philip's office for a long time without speaking. "There's more," Philip said. He slid a second document across the desk. It was an inquiry to a title company. It referenced my Decatur duplex. It was dated 4 months after Catherine's funeral. It was asking about the process for transferring a property title when the owner was elderly and potentially incapacitated. I was 65 years old at the time of that inquiry. I was driving myself to the grocery store, completing my own tax returns, and reading a book a week. Potentially incapacitated, I said. That's what it says. I looked at Philip. He looked at me. "How long do I have before he can do anything legally actionable?" I asked. "Depends on what he's planning. If he's trying to get power of attorney, he needs your signature. If he's trying to pursue guardianship, he needs a court to agree you're incompetent. The second one is harder but not impossible if he plants enough seeds over enough time." I thought about the assisted living facility mentioned casually over shrimp on River Street. I thought about a seed being planted. I thought about how long a seed needs before it grows into something that can break a foundation. "What do I need to do?" I asked. "We need to restructure everything," Philip said, "and we need to do it before he makes a move." I told Philip to proceed. I told him to be thorough. And then I drove back to Savannah, and I waited, because the most important thing I had learned in 38 years of engineering was this: you do not tear down a compromised structure in a panic. You shore up what matters. You document every crack, and you let the structure reveal its own failure on its own timeline. I did not have to wait long. The folder arrived in March. Melissa and Derek drove down together, which was unusual. They took me to dinner at a nice restaurant on Forsyth Park, which was also unusual. Derek ordered a bottle of wine I had not asked for and talked for 20 minutes about estate planning and how his clients who planned early always had the best outcomes. Melissa was quiet in a way that meant she had rehearsed being quiet. After dinner, back at my house, Derek opened a leather portfolio and slid a folder across my kitchen table. "We just want to make sure you're protected, Walter," he said. "This is a durable power of attorney, standard language. It just means that if something happens to you, if you have a medical event or a period where you can't manage things yourself, Melissa can step in without any delay. Without lawyers, without courts. Simple and clean." I opened the folder. I read the document. It was 12 pages long. It was not standard language. It granted Melissa, and by explicit extension her spouse, broad authority over my real property, financial accounts, and healthcare decisions. It included a clause allowing immediate action in anticipation of incapacity, not just in response to it, in anticipation of. 2 words that meant Derek could begin moving assets the moment he decided I might someday be unable to stop him. I looked up at my daughter. She was looking at the table. "Melissa," I said. She looked up. Her eyes were careful. "Did you read this document?" A pause that lasted too long. Derek walked me through it. That is not what I asked. Derek leaned forward. Walter, I want you to feel comfortable. We can have your own attorney look at it if. I will, I said. I will have my own attorney look at it. Derek smiled. The smile did not reach anything above his cheekbones. Of course, absolutely no rush. They stayed the night in the guest room. I lay awake and listened to the house. I thought about Catherine. I thought about what she had said about Derek in the bookshelves. I thought about the 12-page document on my kitchen table that was dressed up as love and was actually a key. In the morning, I made breakfast. Eggs and toast and coffee. We were pleasant. I told them I would be in touch after speaking with my attorney. Derek nodded and said to take my time and put his hand briefly on my shoulder in a way that was meant to feel reassuring and felt instead like a hand checking whether a door was locked. After they left, I sat at my kitchen table for a long time. I was not angry. I want to be clear about that, because people always ask why I did not get angry. I was not angry because anger is a response to surprise, and I was not surprised. I was something colder than angry. I was decided. I called Philip that afternoon. Over the next 11 weeks, Philip and I restructured everything. The Savannah house was transferred into an irrevocable trust with my nephew Owen as trustee. Owen was Catherine's sister's son, a 44-year-old high school history teacher in Chattanooga who had no interest in my assets and every interest in making sure Melissa's children, my grandchildren, were protected. The Decatur duplex was transferred to the same trust. My financial accounts were consolidated and retitled. The beneficiary designations on my retirement accounts and life insurance were updated. Every document that Derek had been quietly researching was moved somewhere he could not reach. An irrevocable trust means exactly what it sounds like. It cannot be undone by a power of attorney. It cannot be reached by a guardianship proceeding. It exists outside the control of anyone I had not specifically designated. Derek could acquire every legal instrument he had been building toward, and he would arrive at a door that had been permanently sealed from the inside. Philip also made calls to an elder law attorney who specialized in financial exploitation of seniors, to an investigator who confirmed that Holloway Advisory Group had no registered clients other than Derek's own family accounts, and to a contact at the Georgia Secretary of State's office regarding the business registration of a company that had been requesting certified copies of an old engineer's property records while that engineer was watching his wife die. I want to tell you about my granddaughter, Emma. She is 9 years old, and she has Catherine's red hair, and she calls me Pop Pop with a confidence that suggests she invented the word. She visits me in Savannah every summer for 2 weeks. We walk the squares. We eat ice cream at the place on Broughton Street. I teach her to identify load-bearing walls in old buildings, which she finds far more interesting than her parents know. Last summer, she found a perfect sand dollar on Tybee Island, and she mailed it to me 2 weeks after she got home with a note that said, "For your collection, Pop Pop. I know you don't have one yet, but now you do." Derek had been using access to Emma as a management tool for 2 years. When I did not agree to the assisted living tour, suddenly Emma's summer visit was shortened to 5 days. When I asked questions about the power of attorney document, suddenly there was a scheduling conflict, and the visit was postponed a month. I noted each instance. Philip noted each instance. We said nothing. The trip to Europe was Derek's idea. He presented it to me as a gift. He and Melissa wanted to do a 10-day trip through Portugal and Spain, and they wanted me to contribute to the cost as a shared family experience. The number he mentioned was $14,000. I wrote the check. I wrote it because I needed them on a plane, and I needed the specific 10 days their itinerary covered. The trust transfer finalized on a Tuesday. I know because Philip called me at 8:47 in the morning and said, "Walter, it's done." Their flight departed that Thursday. I drove to Tybee Island that weekend and walked on the beach and thought about Catherine and felt something in my chest loosen for the first time in 2 years. They landed back in Atlanta on a Sunday afternoon. Melissa called me that evening. Her voice had a quality I had not heard before, not quite anger. Not quite confusion. Something between the two, like a person who has reached for something that has always been in a certain place and found only air. "Dad, we need to talk." "All right." Derek looked into some things while we were traveling. He says some of your accounts look different. They are different. A pause. What did you do? I protected myself, Melissa, the way I should have done 2 years ago. Another pause. Longer. Derek says there's an irrevocable trust. There is. He says that means we can't. She stopped. She had started to say we. I noticed that. She had not said I. She had said we. Melissa, I said. Who prepared that power of attorney document? Silence. Who filed the inquiry with the title company about my duplex 4 months after your mother died? More silence. Who called me about my financial situation after requesting access to documents you shared with him? Documents you shared with your husband, Melissa, about my accounts without asking me. When she spoke again, her voice was smaller. Not the practiced quiet of Thanksgiving dinner, something more genuine. He said he was trying to protect us, protect our family's future. He was trying to position himself, I said. There is a difference. I have the documents. I heard her breathing. I am not doing this to hurt you, I told her. I want that to be clear. The trust protects Emma's inheritance regardless of what happens between us. Your daughter will have the education and the foundation I always intended her to have. That has not changed. Derek is very upset, she said quietly. I imagine he is. He's saying this isn't legal, that you can't just... Philip Garrett's number is in your phone, I said. Have Derek call him. Philip will be happy to walk him through every filing date, every recorded instrument, and every piece of documentation regarding Holloway Advisory Group's prior inquiries into my property records. The call ended shortly after. Derek did call Philip. Philip told me it lasted 4 minutes. Derek was loud for the first 2 minutes and silent for the last 2. Philip had simply read him the list of dates and document titles. There's something very effective about facts arranged in chronological order. They have a weight that argument cannot displace. I did not hear from Derek directly after that. I heard from Melissa twice more in the following month. The first call was tense and circular and ended without resolution. The second call was different. She asked if she could come to Savannah alone. Without Derek. She came on a Saturday in November. I made coffee. She sat at my kitchen table, the same table where the folder had been slid toward me 8 months earlier, and she looked older than 41 in a way that had nothing to do with years. I didn't read it, she said. The document. I didn't read it. I waited. He told me it was straightforward. He handles contracts all the time. I trusted him. I know, I said. That doesn't make it better. No, I said. It does not. She looked at her hands. Mom would be so ashamed of me. That one was hard. I will not pretend it was not hard. I will not pretend it was not hard, because she was right, and because Catherine was not there to be ashamed or to forgive or to sit at this table and say the thing that needed saying with the particular gentleness she had always been able to locate even when I could not. Your mother would be disappointed in the situation, I said carefully. She would not be ashamed of you. There is a distinction. Is there? She would want to know what you were going to do next, I said. That was always her question, not what happened. What next? Melissa was quiet for a long time. What can I do, Dad? You can be honest with yourself about what you allowed to happen, I said. You can make different decisions going forward, and you can understand that Emma's relationship with me is no longer a variable in any equation you and Derek are running. She nodded. It was slow. It had the quality of someone absorbing something they would need time to fully understand. We did not resolve everything that day. I want to be truthful about that, because these stories have a tendency to wrap up too cleanly, and real life does not. Melissa and I are in an uncertain place. She is still with Derek. I do not know what their marriage looks like from the inside, and I have stopped trying to assess it. What I know is that Emma came to Savannah for her full 2 weeks last summer. She found another sand dollar. She added it to the collection. Derek filed no legal action. Philip had made it clear there was nothing actionable to file, and that any attempt to contest the trust structure would require Derek to explain, under oath, the purpose of Holloway Advisory Group and the nature of its prior inquiries into my estate. He has been quiet since, quiet in the way that a person is quiet when they understand the full extent of what they were facing and have decided that continuing is not in their interest. I sit on my porch most mornings. The Savannah air in winter is cool, but not cruel, and the light comes through the live oaks in a way that makes the whole street look like it is underwater. I drink my coffee. I read. Sometimes I drive out to the Tybee Bridge, and I park and I look at the structure of it, the way the load is distributed across the spans, the way something built with integrity holds its shape against the pressure of water and wind and time. I think about Catherine more than I talk about. I think about the garden she never got to plant in Savannah. I think about what she would make of all of this. The folder on the table, the phone calls, the irrevocable trust that now holds the shape of everything I built. I think she would have opinions. She always had opinions, and she was usually right. I got a letter from Emma last week. She drew a picture of the two of us on the Tybee beach. I am very tall in the drawing, and she is very small, and we are both holding sand dollars, and the sun has 8 points, the way children draw suns. I have it on my refrigerator, held up by a magnet from the Georgia Aquarium that she picked out when she was 6. I am not a wallet to her. I am Pop-Pop. I am the man who explains bridges. My grandson for my son's first marriage, a boy named Carter who is 12 and lives in Nashville, called me last month just to tell me about a book he had read about the Golden Gate Bridge. We talked for 40 minutes. I did not know children still called their grandfathers just to talk about books. I was wrong about that, which means I have been wrong about other things too, and I have decided to be grateful for that. I touched my left hand the other morning, the spot where my wedding ring had been, before I moved it to my right hand after Catherine died. The skin there is smooth. There is no mark left. But I know where it was. Some things do not leave a scar you can see. They leave instead a kind of knowledge, something that lives in the bone rather than the skin, something you carry not as a wound, but as a fact about yourself, that you have finally stopped arguing with. I built bridges for 38 years. I understood that a structure fails not when the load gets too heavy, but when the foundation has been quietly compromised over time. I understood that the most dangerous damage is the damage no one is looking at. I looked. That is the only thing I did that mattered. I stopped letting love make me look the other way, and I looked directly at what was there. Derek Holloway had spent 2 years preparing to take everything I had built. He arrived at the conclusion of that preparation to find a locked door and a man sitting quietly on the other side of it who had been expecting him. The law is a slow instrument, but in the hands of a patient man, it is the most precise tool I have ever used. I finished my coffee. I checked the weather. Emma's school has a spring break in April, and she has already asked her mother if she can come to Savannah early. Her mother said yes. I am going to take her to see the Talbotton Road Bridge. I designed the load-bearing calculations on that bridge in 1997. It has been standing for 27 years. Some things you build are meant to outlast the argument about whether they were worth building. If you have ever felt your family treat your trust as an asset to be acquired rather than a relationship to be honored, you know what I carried for 2 years. And if you have ever had to choose between the love you wanted your family to be and the truth about what they actually were, you know how cold that choice feels in your hands. Like this video, if you believe that protecting yourself is not the same as giving up on someone. Subscribe to Frost Vengeance for more stories about people who chose the truth. I am Walter Crane. I am still standing.